I'm coming in hot.
Yeah, hi. I'm Marshall. I'm Cho. I'm the head boys basketball coach at Lake Oswego High School as of today, going into my 8th year. What do you want to know, Travis?
As of today.
Yeah.
Well, head coach, Lake O basketball.
Yeah. Appreciate you repping, by the way.
Yeah, man.
I love it.
It was, this morning I was like, I'm looking in the closet and I was like, I never wear that.
Awesome.
We're going to be in Lake O.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you can appreciate it.
Yes.
This is, I'm trying to think, like, this is the first time we have spoke since you took over, right?
Is that right?
I was trying to think about that. Yeah. Like
since I didn't hire you back onto the staff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I got along too well with the players and the parents.
Yeah.
No, that all worked out because I needed to go to Salem and,
Yeah.
and honestly, I don't want to really be doing what you're doing anyways. I like what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But no, I was like, is that the last time we've actually spoke in person?
Yeah.
And I don't think I've seen you at, like, went to any games or anything, and COVID got weird and yeah.
But we kind of followed each other's journey, since then and stuff. So I feel like we texted maybe once or twice.
Yes.
Or DM'd or that kind of thing, and
yes,
you've been super encouraging over the years. So
yeah,
appreciate it.
Yeah, no, this is cool. You being the first one here in the Bat Cave. So you're coaching at LO, but because I want to say my wife and Heather was like, "Does he not have school today?" And I was like, "I don't think," because a lot of people are the PE teacher and the coach, but obviously you don't work at the school.
No.
So
what is it that I do all day? Yeah.
I know there's the USA basketball thing too, but that
doesn't pay
all the time. And
yeah. I taught for 12 years. So
that's what I thought.
Yeah. I do have my master's in secondary math education from Columbia University.
Okay.
I earned that while I was teaching full time in the South Bronx. From my second and third year teaching there. So I would teach, I'd spend 50 hours in the classroom. And I took night classes straight for 2 years to get my master's. And so after that third year, I have this master's degree in hand. It was through the Teach for America program.
Okay.
So I grew up in Eugene, Springfield really first. And then I went to University of Oregon, graduated, joined the Teach for America program. Next thing I know, it's no different than growing up in Lake Oswego here, in sort of a bubble. Next thing I know, I'm in the boogie down. They gave me, the organization gives you 5 weeks of training.
Okay.
And back then it was in Houston, Texas. Okay. And, you teach kids in summer school, and there's maybe 12 kids, kids who needed, maybe failed a class, needed to make up credits, or they have nothing better to do, so they might as well go to school, get some school and get fed and, all that stuff. And there were Southern kids.
Okay.
All Hispanic kids from the South, and they were super well-mannered. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. And I'm like, man, teaching's easy. I got this. Get to the South Bronx, and I'm at a school. There was 8 of us from Teach for America, all bright-eyed, thinking that we're going to change the world. I mean, it just felt like, we got suckered into it or something, it wasn't even an interview. All 8 of us went into a room. The principal kind of looked at us, checked us out, and said, okay, cool, you're in. We'll see you next week. What? Roll in first day, they hand you the roster, and I have 37 names. And the South Bronx is more diverse than, it's, I would say, predominantly African American, but a good mix of a lot of Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Guatemalans, Hondurans.
Okay.
And again, I live in a bubble. Some of these names I can't even pronounce.
Yeah.
And they kind of push you forward in the cafeteria. Say, here's your roster. Okay, take your class. And I'm reading off 35, 37 names. And I look I'm 46 today, and I can pass as a high school kid even in the hallway sometimes. I look like I'm 15, and I got students who have like full on facial hair and like maybe held back and all of that.
How old were you?
I was 22.
Okay,
Yeah,
early
so
20s.
I took a fifth year studying accounting of all things. That's a whole nother story. But I ended up joining this prestigious teaching program that a lot of people, it's like in some ways it's harder to get into than like an Ivy League school. They're super selective. But it was a reminder that I had been a youth ministry like counselor. I had summer camp experience. At my core I was a teacher. I didn't recognize that until my fifth year of college. Anyhow, I'm again going back to this cafeteria in the South Bronx. Fumble through all these names. Go up to the classroom, right? And there's like 30 desks and chairs, and I have like 35 students. And I'm just like, what do I do now? And so I'm kind of making it work. And I'm going through the rosters, and there's two girls sitting in the middle of the classroom, Lachey Fuller and Lynette Bermudez. And sorry, ladies, 22 years later, I'm still like calling you guys out. This will be forever until I, go to my grave. Lachey, actually, I've reconnected with through Facebook.
Okay.
And she's just like, thank you so much for, being the teacher
That's
you were
awesome.
and all this. But in that moment, I didn't realize I was walking into a situation where the year previous to it, they had gone through 3 different math teachers. So the one veteran teacher like left mid-year. She was just burnt out. And then they got another one. And the kids at this point, they're running the classroom. They, got her out. And then they ended up with 3 different teachers. So in comes this Asian American guy, short, like looks like he's 15. And so the 2 girls are like, oh, like hell no. I'm like, no. They stand up, Travis. These kids like start walking out the room. And at that moment, I grew up in South Korea. I was 10 when I immigrated.
Okay.
In the South Korean culture, teachers are one of the most revered and respected positions in that society. And something clicked in that moment of truth. And I was like, we're not doing this. And I didn't know how else to react. And I took the clipboard in my hand. I just slammed it against the desk in front of me just to get their attention. Like, look down. My clipboard is broken in half. I must have just like taekwondo chopped it like right at the right spot because the thing's broken. And now all the kids are looking at me, going like, what's this deal? The 2 girls stop mid-track, look at me, look at each other, and then they backtrack and sit back in the classroom, and we begin with the lesson. I mean, that's how. Those are literally my first 10 minutes of my teaching career. To follow up with that, though, I didn't have a mentor that I was assigned to, but there was a teacher from the Dominican Republic. Gosh, I wish I could remember his name, like Mr. Alonzo, I think it was. He had been a medical doctor in the Dominican Republic, but he was waiting for his license to all transfer over. So this brilliant like doctor guy teaching basically down the hall from a rookie teacher, and he knew the lay of the land, and he took me under his wings. He said, "Hey, I heard about your first day. This is what you do." And so he gets me in this Nissan Maxima. We're driving around the South Bronx, and he's kind of showing me the lay of the land. He's like, he demoed for me like a home visit. Just got out of the car, went to some kid's house, just knocked on the door, said hello to to whoever. Maybe it was a grandma, maybe it was a mom, and just like, hey, I'm his science teacher. Look forward to having a great year with them, and then just kind of showed me the ropes. So now I'm like, okay, I can do that. Saturday morning, I show up at Lachey's door in the housing projects in the South Bronx. I'm like, I mean, again, I can't. When I look back, I go, what were you thinking? Like, what would mom and dad have done if they knew this kid who's completely new to this community, doesn't know which block is safe, which block is dangerous, going into the housing projects at like 8 a.m, get in the elevator, like you can smell like just this particular one, you could smell some of the urine, you could like it's like just everything is foreign. And I don't say those things to sensationalize. That's what it was. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. Get out the elevator. Hello, it's Mr. Cho. Hello, anybody home? Lachey opens the door, And she's like, oh my God, what is this guy? And she's like trying to shove the, close the door behind. And from the background, it's like, who is it, Lachey? And I'm like, hi, I'm Mr. Cho. I'm Lachey's new math teacher. Oh, come on in, Mr. Cho. Lachey is like mortified. Walk in, sit in the living room, kind of like this comfortable setup. And grandma, I'm just like, look, this happened. Lachey tried to kind of step out of the classroom this week, and she's kind of giving me attitude this week. I just want you to know I'm gonna be her math teacher this year, and I plan on being here for the whole year. And grandma, under the coffee table, takes out like the biggest Bible I've ever seen in my life. Like when you would like presidential swear, and she just just like boom, like sits on the coffee table, opens to like one of the Old Testament, and she's like, now Lachey, like what did we read like right before we sent you to school this week?
Really?
I mean, she's just imagine any seventh grader. You have a 12-year-old, I have a 12-year-old. Like they're like, get me out of this.
Yep.
She had an older brother. It was funny because he was just chuckling the whole time in the background. And I still have the photo. We came downstairs and I said, okay, this is how it's going to be. And I don't know why. I'd still do this with, I handed my camera to the brother and we took a picture together.
Really?
And I had this, as you can see, like this big toothy grin, like, and Lachey's just looking off to the side like, this man's going to be a headache, in my life. And that Monday morning, word spread around campus. Like, if you mess around in Mr. Cho's classroom, he'll show up at your door. I'm saying it's crazy. So between that and all the playground yard, pickup basketball games, because I played high school at Springfield. I was, pretty good athlete, and I got some game to me. I strategically like kind of scouted the yard. And called out a couple kids who were like really good, and I played them one-on-one and beat them. And then it's like, oh, Mr. Cho got game, all of this stuff. So between those two things, where I saw some of my other Teach for America cohorts like just struggling, every day I was walking into like school, like I couldn't wait to get to school, and it was like the most chaotic environment you could ever paint. Like, I still have colleagues who are teaching back there in the Bronx, and we're like, how do we survive those days? And it was really, I realized I was meant to be doing what I was doing then.
And you, with saying that, and my wife's a teacher, I'm surrounded by educators, and she'll talk a lot about like getting weary, and so one of the things about all this is like when you say, I went in there, it's like, okay, so what mindset, when others were struggling in that environment, what mindset allowed you to go in there with that, where it probably, you easily could have been overwhelmed, or I don't really want to go back, or I don't really want to, like what was driving that?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. So on the short term, I was a miserable like college accounting major. Like I was doing the thing as an immigrant son of, oldest of 3 siblings. My parents, had to work just odd. My dad was an apartment manager, manager of a 54 unit complex in Springfield. My mom helped with that and also cleaned people's houses as a maid. Like, it's growing up just seeing how hard my parents had to work, and they weren't ever going to go back to Korea. There was an immigrant work ethic, but like, coaching, you hear a lot of people say, burn the boats, and you're not going back. Like, no, we're not going back to Korea.
Yeah.
I did grow up with some like, go back to China, comments, racist comments when I was growing up. And I go like, I can't, like, I'm not from there and I can't go back to Korea either. I'm here. Yeah. And so I think some of that, like when I got there, it was like, I'm not going anywhere. I have to make it here.
Yeah.
In New York City, like I'm going to make it here.
Yeah.
And so there's some of that grit that I learned from my parents, but also just touching on just being a miserable accounting major. Like I hated it. I hated what I was doing. And all of a sudden I get to do something that I was kind of fit for. So that was there. But really, beyond those two things, it was the support network I had. I had Mrs. Fraser, who passed away, some years ago. She was a veteran teacher. I lived on 118th and Lenox, like in the heart of Harlem. She lived in the housing projects like 4 blocks down, and she had this tan Toyota Camry, and she.
It's amazing how much detail.
Oh, I remember.
And the brand of the vehicles.
No,
and
all of that. It really feels like yesterday when it's as I'm sitting in this chair, just kind of recollecting those days. She lived in the housing projects where the famous basketball courts were they called it the Kingdom.
Okay.
Which again, people from the Northwest understand from where the Sonics played.
Yeah.
But it felt like you were in an arena, like an indoor dome, because the housing projects just swallowed up this court that sat in the middle of this, this area. So she lived on like 114th, and she would drive up to 118th. I would walk out from, up the street, and she would pick me up every day. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
Like I found a neighbor who was like, probably took pity on me because she saw all the other teachers struggling. And she's like, this one's going to probably struggle the most.
He needs extra help.
He's going to need extra help, which, she realized quickly. She's like, oh, he's good. Yeah. Then we became like friends, and like we would talk every day. But, I had somebody like that driving me every day. Yeah. I had just neighbors who welcomed me from day one and made me feel like, so when I was even after a long day's work where there would be challenging days, I came home to a block, of this African-American community that just took me in, and it almost took me back to when I immigrated to Springfield, Oregon, again, being the only Korean kid in the school. Now I'm an adult and I'm the only Korean guy on the block. And in both those instances, where in my professional career, I fought for that sense of belonging every day, and I had that chip in that fight. But certain pockets of my life growing up in America, in the black and white world that as an Asian American have to navigate, like I found belonging, I found acceptance. So just having those things allowed me to sustain that career for 6 years and have success.
So after 6 years, what did you transition into?
Yeah. I was burnt out, first of all.
Okay.
So 3 years in the South Bronx, the school was deemed a failing school by the New York City Board of Education.
Okay.
And so they phased out the school. So they didn't take an incoming 6th grade class next year. So this massive middle school building, there's only a 7th, 8th grade class. And then the next one, there was only an 8th grade class.
Gotcha.
And so progressively, that job did become harder. And I went through some stuff where it really made you question, and we'll get to this even with the Lake Oswego basketball journey, but that when you get to 3 years, you're either a make or break.
Yeah.
You hear that a lot in the basketball world, right? Like by your 3rd year, your team should reflect who you are. Well, by that 3rd year, like the school was kaput. We didn't have a job coming back. They said, you're going to need to start looking for a job because the school is shutting down.
Gotcha.
Just imagine, like, if you're a basketball coach and you're Chauncey Billups and you're coaching the Blazers, and go, by the way, by year 3 you'll be fired and the team will not be here. Like, how are you gonna bring the excellence and the fight that these kids deserve?
Yeah.
So that was really like at the end of it. It was, in one hand, there was a sense of closure, so I could move on. So I didn't feel like I was abandoning my students, but I knew that I had run the race in that chapter as faithfully as I could. Yeah. But I knew that I couldn't leave the inner city education setting without having tasted success. Like, again, we're sports people. So like, I'm not going out on an L, man. Like, I need to know for my own sanity that like a high level of education under, properly resourced settings can, even the playground that is so just skewed for kids in certain school districts to lose. Yeah. Like it really drove me to be like, I'm not leaving like this. And ironically, I found a charter school. I had no idea that existed because I was so busy working 60 hours a week and getting my master's, that there was this amazing charter school that existed just 4 blocks walk up from my neighborhood. So on 122nd and Lenox was a charter school called Future Leaders Institute, where this married couple, where the husband ran a nonprofit, a branch of the school, and the wife was the principal. And he was such a masterful fundraiser. He raised like $1 million and funneled it right into this K-8 school. Wow. I mean, it was just like this amazing like oasis in the middle of a
that's like
school.
Every educator's dream.
Yeah, let's just get some money and just pour it into it and see what happens. And turns out you give, equal footing anywhere, these kids are going to thrive.
Yeah.
And it was through a K through 8 school, which meant that like if you had siblings, in a given day, you could see my 8th grade student walking in and her 2 younger siblings, dropping one off at the kindergarten, another at the 4th grade, and come into my classroom. Like where can you find that?
Yeah.
And you talk about, how I felt getting dropped off by Mrs. Fraser in their Toyota Camry. And now I'm walking home to this, like, whatever. Now, instead of, I'm walking those 4 blocks and I see someone's grandma. I see another student walking up, we go to the same bodega around the corner. And so that sense of community on that like 5 or 6 block radius, I went to church like 6 blocks away, so I really got a sense to like that little pocket in Harlem was like my little haven in Manhattan. So yeah, it was an incredible experience. That's where I started first coaching a basketball team officially. My second year there, it was my 4th year total. I'm sorry, 5th year total. So 5th and 6th year of teaching.
Okay.
I also coached a charter school team that was really good.
Okay.
And so we came in 2nd place. My 1st year coaching, we lost in the championship game, even though we were undefeated. I thought it was easy. I was like, man, this is easy. I'm Pat Riley. Like this is, I'm built for this. And we lose, and the kids just were devastated. And a lot of them, were in this like single parent situations. They had trust issues with the male authority figure, and they were like, this is too hard. Like, I don't know if I want to play next year. Like, I'm like, are you crazy? The whole team's coming back. We're going to win next year.
Yeah.
And so that took some convincing and trust building and all that. We come back the 2nd year, the league had expanded, and now we're playing other teams that are even better than the team we lost to. And I'm like, okay, I promised the guys we come back, we're winning a state championship. It's the hubris of like a rookie coach, right? Like,
Yeah.
we can do this. And I'm like, oh crap, we're gonna lose again. And ironically, we win. We had this insane overtime win in the semifinals. Kids are carrying me off the floor on their shoulders like some Disney movie scene. And I'm like, man. And so we win, and I'm like, hooked. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. So in the meantime, as I'm wrapping up my 6th year, I met my wife at the local church I was just mentioning. She's also Korean American. Born in Trenton, grew up in Texas, went to Columbia, and so she and I met. She's also Korean American, which I thought might be a sign since it was predominantly Black and Hispanic church. So I figured there was some signs there that I'm not smart, but
some big ones.
I followed that cue. So yeah, we ended up getting married. She was working at the time when we met for an organization called Save the Children, which was doing HIV/AIDS prevention work in Africa and all over the world. And then she got a fellowship to go to Mozambique and work with the organization. So yeah, we did a long distance relationship for a year. And that summer, after I finished my 6th year, we got married, and I was a trailing spouse to Mozambique, which is in the southeastern corner of the continent. And it's this beautiful country that's twice the length of California, that runs along the Indian Ocean. So spent the next 3 years there, learning the language, getting to know the people.
What language do they speak there?
So it's a former Portuguese colony.
Okay.
So they were smart.
Okay.
They had Mozambique.
Okay.
And then they had Angola. And then they had Cabo Verde. So when they were taking all the natural resources, that was kind of the path, You go to a country like that, at the time we went, it was the darling of the NGO world, non-governmental organizations. So it was a stable government. A lot of the money that was being poured into it was, being put to good use. And so it was a good situation. But you realize, like, when you peel back the layers, I mean, it's a country that had gone through 30 years of civil war. And, we talked about, Africa just being such a big continent. Like, each country is going to have their own identity. Just like Florida is different from, Washington.
Right.
And so in that country, because it was a socialist country for so long, that there was the natural doubt or natural like speculation of who you are, like that existed, that barrier existed. And sometimes people would say like the biggest compliment you can get with the Mozambican is if they invite you to their house for dinner. So if you can break through that a little bit, and obviously if basketballs breaks through a lot of those barriers pretty quick, so I was able to develop a lot of meaningful relationships and really, have an appreciation for what true resilience looks like. What, you know, there's a famous saying, it's called a luta continua, which means like the struggle, the fight continues. And it's like a national rallying cry. And I think about that a lot as I'm sitting in the comforts of Lake Oswego. Like, what is my struggle? Like, what am I fighting for?
Yeah.
Because I think if you don't have that, then you're too comfortable and you're not growing. So I'm constantly like, I think about how they were, the people of Mozambique were able to push past similar circumstances as the South Bronx. Like, your hands are tied behind your back, and you have all these challenges and struggles in front of you. How are you pushing forward even despite all that? And I think I learned a lot of that, through the relationships I built in Mozambique.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's something I've talked about that with quite a few people in terms of being raised in America. And I mean, for me, I didn't struggle with a whole, I mean, really, like, my first real struggles was like when I was an adult. Like, school was easy. I was a hooper. I was popular. Like, all these things just came. And really, like, when I look back, I'm like, yeah, I wasn't really prepared to like handle what real life was gonna do. And it has beat the crap out of me, and I've learned how to overcome things. And with my wife, who I said used to live in Africa, like, when she came back to the States, a few of the things that really like stood out to her was she didn't like driving on the highways because they drive so fast, and where she was at, it was like little motorcycles and dirt roads. Going to the grocery store, because here there's so many options. It's so overwhelming. So some of the stuff that like if you're here, you don't even really realize, there's all these things. Advertisements, like, here we're advertised all the time, like, constantly, just a barrage of this, buy, all this stuff. It just was interesting. Like, she's like, it's overwhelming being here. But when you're here, like, you're not even really realizing, all these different things and these comforts. And I've even thought, like, I don't know, in terms of like attitude and perspective and joy, I've even thought, like, maybe it's more difficult to kind of have that here than other places, because it is so comfortable. It is like what you're saying, like, you learned some of this stuff, you saw some of it, you lived it, and now you're like, okay, how do I always kind of keep myself a bit uncomfortable in these comfortable surroundings, to stay a little bit uncomfortable, which brings some humility and some understanding of others. And, and I've thought, like, here in the States, I mean, you think about it, like, some of the shortages, like
The toilet paper shortage.
like, we go to the, and Adrian's laughing because she's like, that's what, like, other people, like, they're not used to just having 5 options for the same type of soup. And so, that's an interesting thought of, like, when we are in this comfort space, like, how do you stay grounded? How do you stay a bit uncomfortable? Especially in nice communities where you're not, there isn't really a whole, lot of struggle. I guess in terms of that, in terms of monetarily speaking, financially speaking, there can still be mental health and different kind of stuff you don't see. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely, with Adrian living in Africa, like, we've, had those talks of, like, what she saw and lived with over there and what it's like over here. So I'm definitely relating to some of that stuff you're sharing.
Yeah. The first time you come back and you go to Costco, it's, I think there's a term for it. I don't know it's re-entry. And then I don't know if it's PTSD or something to that nature. And you just, there's a visceral physical reaction to it. Like, how can we live in a country this wealthy? Like, this is crazy. You get overwhelmed. And I know some people have had a harder time than others dealing with that. As you and I are just talking about this now, I just think, man, like, how impactful would it be to take a 14-year-old, not a 24-year-old or 34-year-old, you know? Like, what does it do to a young person living in places like this when you get to see that? And your world opens up just a little bit more, you know? So it's funny that, like, we're talking about this now, and I'm sure the audience is predominantly Oregonians, but,
Right.
you know, it's something I've dreamt about a lot. Like, what would it look like to take a group from here to Mozambique?
Yeah.
And have them see through that world through the lens that I got to see as a grown-up. But then also as a grown-up, get to see how they're processing everything as young people, you know? I mean, you know, we could talk about this Africa thing forever, but I really think about, like, how do I structure practice? How do I demand certain standards in our basketball practice that push them out of that, you know? And it's the balance of understanding, like, where their mental health being is, given what we just came out of, but also, like, this upcoming season, I think, you know, we have this term called everything earned. Like, every year we say something, you know, truth, fears, no question is a big one that we use in our program, but everything earned. Like, what does it look like for you to earn this jersey, these shoes that you get from our Nike sponsorship, this, you know, this playing time, right? This roster spot. Like, what does it look? What discomforts, what struggles did you have to overcome to earn this? And so that's been something on my mind, and it can't be something that's, like, fake manufactured.
Yeah.
Like, it's got to be authentic, and it's got to be within the context of our program and our culture. But it's, you know, this conversation is bringing up a lot of that. Like, you know, the playoff games are uncomfortable. It's stressful. Things don't go the way you want it to go. You know, so how do you react in those moments? You know, and I think we always talk about a lot of who we are as basketball players is actually a reflection of how we are off the court. And so you know, a conversation like today's is really making me think, like, what are some things that I, as a leader of young men, can do off the court that trigger some of those conversations?
Yeah. I mean, man, when we're talking about that, I actually think about, as a parent, I co-parent, and actually I think one of my, as we're talking, I'm like, I think one of my, in terms of, like, everything earned, I'm like, I need to do a better job with my daughter. Like, and I think it comes from some of my insecurity of being a co-parent where I don't have her all the time.
Yep.
And then I'm thinking, okay, she doesn't get to see me all the time. And then when she's with me, which is about, you know, half time each way, mom, dad, I'm like, I don't know. There's almost this part that wants to overcompensate a little bit, because it's like, man, I'm missing her half the time. Sometimes she'll be gone for a week, come back, and I'm like, you literally got taller.
Yeah.
And you know, the everything earned thing, especially she's 7th grader now, like she's starting to know what's up.
Yep.
And I've just been thinking, like, I think I need to put in some different, like, right now she kind of just gets what she wants, and some of that is, like, my insecurities that I'm bringing into that. And rather than, man, it's going to feel tough right now, but it will benefit her later, of making her work through, because honestly, she's kind of a wimp, and it's like, it's my fault. Like, in some way, like, she's so sweet and
she's
thoughtful.
She's gonna hear this interview, right?
She hates this She hates this podcast.
Yeah.
So she probably won't listen right now.
Okay. She'll listen to it.
Eventually she probably will.
Yeah.
She's the one that drew the logo of the chair.
Awesome. That's beautiful.
The story behind that is, you know, I have some other companies, and those logos are your typical professional straight lines, whatnot. But with this idea and the conversation of, like, yo, Marshall, tell me your story, I've yet to meet anyone's story that was like a straight line.
Never. Yeah.
And so, you know, I thought, well, let me get a logo that looks like a kid drew it and is a little squiggly and a little messy, because I don't know anyone's story that's, like, just clean and like, I just went from here to here and it was easy. And so that's the story behind the logo, is she drew it. And she doesn't know, and I know she won't listen to any of these anytime soon, but I have the original drawing, and I will frame it one day and give it to her. But it's funny, like, there's enough people in the Salem area that are, like, she's meeting, and they're, and, you know, they're like, yo, your dad's podcast is kind of cool. And
Yeah.
she's like, I'm still a hater. Like just last week out of nowhere, she's like, I can't believe you have a podcast. And
Wow.
I
Because
didn't,
it's like a cliche to her, like the
yes,
cool seventh grader.
yes.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there. I didn't even respond to her. She must have been on my Instagram thing
Yeah.
or whatever on her phone.
Yeah.
She's like, I can't believe you have a podcast. I don't say anything. And then she was like, I'm still a hater, and I'm like, oh, it's growing on her a little bit.
Yep.
It's growing on her a little bit.
She's resisting. We're in a room full of like Darth Vader and all the Star Wars.
The resistance.
The resistance. She's the resistance. You're the empire.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, but even like with this podcast, I'm trying to show her through actions of how to take an idea and start to work it and stick with it.
Yep.
And, because I used to have 0 followers and now it's got, 500 followers on Instagram and,
cool.
YouTube, whatever. And trying to show her like, here's just was an idea.
Yeah.
And your little drawing of a chair. And now we're starting to make some hats and we'll make hoodies and just showing her like sticking with it.
Yep.
And, it's eventually it'll grow. And, one day, this is really cool. But like, what about the beginning though? Mm-hmm. What about like when no one knew what it was and we stick with it and we keep pushing. And so, just as you were talking about everything earned, I was just kind of like thinking about as a parent and how I could do a better job and what would be those things. It's like those fine lines. Like I want to help them. I want to love on. But I don't know. Like I do think I'm like, yo, if we took her to Rwanda, like where Adrian, like it would be like what?
No, first of all, I mean, I taught middle school for 12 years, and so what that's taught me more than anything is you can't break them. I mean, you can really, maybe if you're a super abusive parent or teacher, you can crack them, but 12-year-olds are so resilient, man, and they're so resourceful and they're so smart. They're already onto you. She's probably like listening right now or something. But can we go back to? It's funny, the word wimp.
Yeah.
I love that. I haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah,
because one of our core values is courage. Actually, it's the first one. We start every conversation with courage. So I'll be happy to share about like why that's important to me. But can you share with me a little bit about like that word and like what about like that wimpish, it's like a characteristic that you may
with
see
her,
that bothers you, or it's like it's
so
a dissonance.
So good question. So I grew up with a brother, 16 months older than me, bigger than me. I think that's what I think that helped make me into the competitor that I am.
Sure.
We got in physical fights, which was him beating me up.
Yep.
And growing up hooping, I was never the fastest or the strongest or really the anyest in any of the categories. Eventually I got tall. Like I went freshman year 6'1", sophomore year 6'7", but I used to be point guard, so I could still handle and shoot and whatnot. So that played well with the height. But I look back and I'm like, where did I get kind of that dog in me when I go on the court, I'm like, yo, you might be better than me, but not tonight.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have any siblings.
Yep.
And this is just me, bringing in what I grew up with, but I'm not seeing that competitive, like when we go, like right now she plays sports because her friends do.
Yep.
And maybe that is a generic thing in that middle school space. I'm seeing some of her other friends, like they really like to do this and like they're working at it. Yep. Where she's just like, well, my friend's doing it, so I do it, but I don't really care. Yeah. And like at the house, it's like the moment there's any kind of like, it's like, I don't even want to do it. I don't even want to work through it. She's my only kid. So maybe that's just how, middle schoolers are. I will say a buddy of mine is a principal in Hillsborough at a middle school. And some of this stuff that we've talked about, he's like, yo, she's just a middle schooler. She's just a middle schooler. And I don't have any other kid. Like, so maybe that is the answer.
Yeah.
And so I think when I use the term term wimp, I think I compare it to when I grew up, I had this older brother beating on me, but it also pushed me.
Yeah.
And I still remember to this day the first time I beat him 1-on-1 in basketball.
It's
I
big.
remember
It's a
where it
moment.
was.
Yeah.
And it was finally like, I am now better than you, and I will never not be better than you, and you will never beat me again 1-on-1.
Yeah.
And so some of that stuff, it's like I kind of wish she had a sibling so
Yeah.
they could kind of,
Yeah.
you know, but I use that term, but she's also extremely thoughtful,
Yeah.
and there's some great qualities about her,
Yep.
and I don't want to put on her, well, dad and mom hooped,
Yeah.
and she's even thrown that in our face a little bit,
Yeah.
like, yeah, I hear about, because her mom was a hooper too. Her mom's almost 6 foot tall.
Okay.
Like Riley's
Yeah.
probably gonna be pretty dang tall.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even like, yeah, I heard about you and mom,
Yeah.
and so we're trying to like not be those parents that, you go do what we did.
Yeah.
But the term wimp, like, that's a good question. Like, I think it's just not having that sibling rivalry is probably why, like, I use that term.
Yeah.
And she's the only kid, like, so she gets everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where I'm like how I grew up,
Yeah.
in those battles and whatnot.
So for you as a parent seeing that, right? Because I think I hear that all, if I had $1 for every time, right? And I could just fill in the blank as a coach, anytime a parent came to me and said XYZ, I'd have many dollars collected over years. And it's a lot of it. Like I'll hear, can you tell Johnny to shoot more? I'm like, no, Dad, he needs to shoot less. But some kids, they do, and they don't have the courage to take that shot.
Yeah.
Right. Something's holding them back from seizing that moment. Somebody might not drive to the basket when that moment's there. And so for your daughter, you might see she could run for student council. And you see it in her, but she doesn't see it for herself, and she can't see the lanes that you see.
Yeah.
Right. And so as a parent, that could be frustrating. And then at those times, you really hope that there are friends and mentors and impactful teachers and coaches that are in their life that are gonna carry on the work that you desire for your child. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I had $1 for every time, in the wimp word, like I don't think politically being correct here, in our community, like I don't think anybody would say, "Oh, my son's a wimp, a wuss," or something even more vulgar.
Right.
Because I come back to courage.
Yeah.
So I go, my question to you as a father of a 12-year-old would be like, what are some moments that you've seen your daughter where she's exhibited courage? And it could be as easy as like calling her dad out. Hey,
actually, with that being said, recently she did something that I thought I wouldn't have done that.
There you go.
So I pick her up from school this couple weeks ago, and she loves school. She's very studious. Awesome. She loves it. And so she's always checking her grades on the app on her phone. And so we go grab a bite to eat, and she said something about one of her classes, and she's like, "Oh, let me check my grades." So she gets on, and she's like, "What?" She was like, "I talked to that teacher, and they were supposed to raise the grade because blah, blah, blah." And she was like, "First thing tomorrow when I get to school, I'm going to go talk to that teacher and remind him about the conversation we had." And I was thinking, I don't think in 7th grade I was going to go have that conversation with my teacher.
No.
And so, that's, I mean, in terms of academics, we don't I never really check. She's always checking in on that stuff. And to be honest, like when I really think about like the wimp thing, really it's not being wimpy. It's some insecurities that like right now what she's going through, which I'm sure it's the age, but yes, she's taller than most of the girls. She's not as thin as most of her friends. She really does not like her hips, and that's more from her mom, not from me. But just the way where they're positioned.
But you're talking identity. So she's rebelling against the identity that the world is going to put on her, what her parents did. And so in that own rebellion, as we sit in this room again, is courage, right? Courage is about making choices. And so you have to, I'm not a family counselor, but
this is
say
good.
This, I say this to my parents all the time. You have to recognize and look for moments of courage and foster that. And she'll come to it if she does, on her own terms. I say this like as if I'm an expert, but I'm raising a 12-year-old boy and a 9-year-old daughter, and you can imagine my son loves basketball, but I fought so hard to make sure that his identity isn't wrapped up in that game but he's small like me and he's young for his grade, so he's always had to that fight a little bit. If I had it my way, I would have held him back and have him be the older kid, But my wife, in her infinite wisdom, was like, he's getting straight A's. He's in kindergarten. He can read. Like, he's moving on. So there's a built-in chip that he has because he's a year younger than everybody in his grade. But it's something that comes naturally in our relationship, Whereas, as I'm like, giving you a ribbing about your daughter, like with my daughter, she's 9. She has her own thing. She's a little wimpy, if I'm going to be real with you. If I see her playing soccer, she doesn't like contact and all that stuff. But, she doesn't want to do something that her older brother and her dad, that's their thing. Hoops is their thing. I'm going to find my own thing, right? And I have to respect it. And it challenges me like, man, I got to really meet her where she's at. Because the thing with my son is easy. Because he just like jives with what I do, and I have to be mindful of, again, now just falling into this, like, just into that little, my wife was like, basketball again tonight? Like, can we not watch basketball? Because, but for my daughter, she is fiercely courageous in so many other things that, like you said, I would never go, I wouldn't have gone to confront a teacher about my grade. Like, and so celebrating that and cultivating it, as much as you can. And if they come, they come. If they don't, if they choose something else, then you meet them there, because that's what you're supposed to do.
It's very timely to have this conversation and hear this, because like I said, I don't have any other kids, and I get her half the time, so I feel like I'm already a bit back with that, and then feeling like when I do have her, like, I got to do all the perfect, I don't know, maybe even overthinking it. Whereas if she just was in the house all the time, it just is what it is. I always see her. But recently, me and Adrian started going to a trainer to work out. And I've brought Riley a few times now. She's kind of fought it, but I'm like, nope, come. But I just said, you just got to come. You don't have to do anything. And what's been interesting is giving her the space of, I just want you to come and kind of see what the gym is and, just get that feel. So then we start work. And I told her, I go, right, this is how I really sold her. I go, you're going to watch me do some exercises where I look like goofy, and I'm going to get really tired and I'm going to struggle. And I was like, you're going to like watching your dad do that. And she's like, yeah, I think you're right. Well, what was really cool is, so we get there, she's kind of sitting off to the side. I'm not trying to force anything. We start doing some exercise, boo-boo. And then she slowly starts to come over. She's like, so what's that working on? And eventually she's down doing these planks where, like, we're touching the ball, planking back, touching this ball, plank. And she's now on the ground looking at me, touching that same ball. And, that's when I was like starting to realize, okay, it's not that she wants to be wimpy and not do anything. She's just very insecure on what to do. And so it goes a little bit longer. And then she was like, she comes over and she whispers, she was like, hey, do you think Lacey like has any workouts that like help get my stomach flatter? And I was like, right, honestly, like Lacey, because Lacey's like fit now. I was like, she actually has been on a fitness journey for the last year and a half, and she hasn't always looked like that. And I said, I think she does. You should talk to her. And so I go off and do my thing. And I look over. They're over on their phones, right? We get done with the night. We're driving home. Like, hey, what were you and Lacey doing? She was like, she gave me a couple exercises I could do at the house to work on my core.
I mean, that's it right there. It's in the power of testimony. When I was teaching in the inner city school settings, it was, there's a statistic, like if you have an African American male teacher, those students, the African American male students in that classroom will do a significant percentage better than like other peers, right? It's seeing somebody who looks like you, who you can relate to and say, I can be that, right? And so again, the challenge for your daughter is like, she doesn't have like, as much as you must have hated, like, you know, getting beat up by your older brother, there's a part of you that's like, I want to be like him.
Yeah.
You know, like I want to be like, I want to have those muscles. I want to, you know,
Right.
I want to be able to drive. So there's always something that's pulling you or pushing or, you know, drawing you to it. And your daughter doesn't have that naturally. So again, just touching on that, like, who are those people that you're going to intentionally put into her life to do that work that you can't as a male?
And like, honestly, like as a parent and whatnot, like that's a humbling thing where like, man, like I want to just be able to, and it's like, no, like that's not going to be, that's not where I can speak into her and she's going to hear what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I would say I have started to try to be strategic about like, all right, like I know where I want to go.
Yeah.
And you know, what's funny is in most of the other areas of my life, I'm actually really good at that.
Yeah.
I'm really good at that because it's my little, the one, you know, my one thing, it's just a lot more difficult to take me out of it.
Yep.
And all right, let me just listen to what she's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, I mean, coming back to the everything earned with the program, and really trying to, you know, be a caretaker of the program. And how do I don't know. When we first met, I always thought this guy sees a bigger picture here and not just building up good, great hoopers, but people. And, you know, that's something as I've watched you go about your journey and whatnot, and just from a distance, it seems like you really have a care and a passion for building up people, not just as a basketball player. And let me teach you a better crossover or whatever. And I like seeing that. Especially because I'm a basketball guy, but just I really like seeing that in sport and people building programs and just making it bigger than whatever that thing is. And so, yeah, I've been, you know, looking forward to like hearing your story. And I knew a little bit about New York and Africa. I don't know what after Africa, how was it the DeMatha
Yeah,
thing?
it was like DeMatha Catholic.
Okay. Yeah. Is that what brought you from Africa back to the States?
No, we actually had plans to move back. So my wife had been there for 4 years. I had been there for 3 years. And, you know, I don't know if we're an hour into this or whatever, but, you know, appreciate you having me on the chair.
Yes.
You know, and on the drive over, you know, I was contemplating if I share this or not. But, you know, we had an amazing 3 years of marriage there. It was a quick relationship. We dated for like 6 months. We were long distance for like a year. And so it was a time that my wife and I really cherished, but also it was our third year. We got pregnant. We had a child. We were expecting, you know, this baby, and we experienced a stillborn like death, like, you know, something I probably haven't shared publicly anywhere. But I was thinking about, you know, speaking of daughters. So I have an older daughter that's not here, and her name's Avery, and we lost her on February 3rd of 2009. So she would be like that older sister figure to your daughter. She would be the older sister, you know. She's the oldest of 3. Like my wife is an oldest of 3. I'm an oldest of 3. But we're raising 2 children in Lake Oswego. It was, I mean, devastating. Like, you know, we were monitoring it. We were living in Mozambique, but we had to go to a hospital across the border in South Africa, in a city that my wife and I really didn't like, called Nelspruit. It's that's an old Afrikaans word, right? Like the colonizers, you know, whatever you want to call it. It's not a local word, and so, but it's like any suburb you would think. This isn't like what you picture as Africa. Like it could look like Medford, like driving into Medford. Gotcha. It's like dry. It's, you know, it kind of looks like California. And so we lost this baby like with the week before, you know, my wife was scheduled to have a C-section, and it's to this day the most devastating loss I've ever had. And I remember really coming out of that time, I was teaching at the American School, international school, a school similar demographic to Lake Oswego in that it's really wealthy families or influential, families, children of diplomats or business, owners, and but at the same time, like exceptional young people, like global thinkers, can navigate multicultures, their different cultures. And I really enjoyed my time teaching and coaching there. But in the midst of it, that's the loss that I was going through, and I had to finish that the rest of the school year. And I was coaching a team then, and I remember distinctly thinking like how I'm going to cope through this grieving was to give back, like to not. And we talk about just as coaches even today, like how everybody judges you, and if you take in everybody's resentment and you take it in and you hold it to yourself, that can be really toxic and poisonous, right? And so you think about this significant loss and how I cope with it, was obviously very different from my wife who carried the baby. And that's the physical loss of it is you and I will never be able to, meet her where she needs to be met. And so that's, again, not just, you talked about being a parent and not being able to do that for your daughter, being a husband and not being able to do that for the person you love the most in the world is discomfort.
Yes.
Like we talk about comfort zones,
yes.
you're living in that, out of that comfort zone. But anyhow, going back to my coaching, I just really poured into my team. I made sure that they had this amazing experience. I took them on trips. I scheduled games with local teams so that they were getting out of their bubble. Something similar I try to do now at Lake Oswego. And I built a basketball court. Like it's, of all the, basketball accolades, like that's something I don't talk about often, but I know I did it in the memory of my daughter. And so when I was able to finally, like, I wrote on a backboard, like, for Avery, and I put her date, and they painted over it, right? But it's for me, to know that, like, I provided something for the kids there in her memory. And so, anyhow, as I'm in the course of all that, I'm winding. This is a chapter of how I got to DeMatha that I really, reflect on and go, I was coaching in the middle of nowhere in Africa. Like, nobody knew who I was, right? And I found joy in teaching the game to the locals as well as the expat families. And in the midst of it, I had scheduled an American coach to come and run a clinic. I had an hour-long coffee meeting on Nike campus. My parents were here, so I would come back to Beaverton every summer. And I had an hour-long coffee meeting with a gentleman named Tony Dorado, who's the national manager for high school basketball for Nike. And I said, I have a year left in this country. What can I do to leave the biggest impact? And he said, coach the coaches. They will carry on your work. And so long story short, I ended up hosting Tony and the coach that he said, hey, if you set up the coaches clinic, you can find flight and hotel. I will send you one of my coaches. And that coach happened to be Mike Jones, the head coach at DeMatha Catholic. So at that point, we had about 2 weeks left in the country. We didn't know where we were going to end up. It was either going to be in New York, where our siblings were, DC, where a lot of that work, professional, opportunities that my wife would go back to in public health work, or Dallas, where my in-laws are from. And so we ended up in DC, and, I ended up calling Coach Jones up, and, he had offered me the job on the second day of the trip to Mozambique. Like, he's like, if you're ever in the area and you don't come work for me, I'm going to be mad. And so I called him up. He assigned me to be an assistant freshman coach. This is the 2009-10 season. And the first day I walked into the gym during summer, like a summer league practice, Victor Oladipo was a senior.
Okay.
Jerry Grant, who also played in the league, was a senior. Quinn Cook was a junior. And Jeremy Grant, who now plays for the Blazers, was a sophomore. Okay. And there were like 12 Division I players on this team.
So they were pretty good.
They were better than anything, that I've seen here. Yeah. So in the blink of an eye, and I attribute a lot of that, my career trajectory changing paths, on how I responded to my moment of, grief and adversity. That something good can come out of something so horrific. So much of my coaching career is kind of, it's really my private testimony to my daughter that I don't have, you know, so that like, and it's also where I draw my strength or courage, as we talk about in our program. Like, you can't hurt me with your words. I've been through hell and back. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm built for this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just sitting here like, I think I'm old enough now, seen enough life where, usually like when there might be people that have bad attitudes or tough situations or whatnot, I always think like, all right, what is it I'm not seeing? Like you never know what someone's going through,
Yeah.
you know, because you're over there and you're pouring in all this time with these players and whatnot and building the court and like they have no idea. Like it's just a testament, like, and a reminder, you have no idea what people are going through.
Yeah.
And you know, like even for me, like I've knowing you from a distance, like I'm like, all right, there's something, you know, that there's something in his story. He was here and here and here. Like there's gonna be something I'm gonna be like, man, yeah, I just had no idea. Like yesterday, a guy that I met with, and we actually talked so long that we didn't shoot the episode, and he had to go, and we'll redo it. But we were talking about the logo of the chair, and he had said, he was like, you know, when I first started watching your stuff, my wife kind of like, and he's a teacher, but he's also a social media like manager guy for businesses. So he makes logos and does a bunch of stuff. And she was like, kind of like on the logo, and he was like, "There's got to be a story to this. Yeah. Like I want to hear like, because this isn't this isn't regular. Yeah. There's got to be a story." Yeah. And I've kind of thought that like with you, like I wonder, there's something in here that, you know, is real. Like you immigrated, and I know there's some grit with that, and your parents and watching them do that. I recently had someone on, her name is Ellen Yin in Salem. She's got a podcast. I don't even know if she's 30 yet, but she's killing it. Yeah. And part of her story, and she was referred to me, someone was like, yo, you got to have Ellen on. And she came here when she was 2, I believe, from China. And it's funny because she totally downplayed her upbringing here. Because she was kind of telling me her story, and she would get adversity, and then she would be really creative and overcome it. Yeah. And a few of the stories in there, I was like, yo, that is really cool. Like how she got into her college is a very cool story in her episode. And I was like, where did you learn that? Like where? Yeah. And she was like, I don't know. I guess I kind of, so she starts talking about like as a kid. And she's like, well, I learned English way quicker than my parents did. Right. So I had to like field phone calls when I was, 7, 8 years old. Yeah. I had to sign checks. I had to. Yeah. So she's saying all this stuff. And I was like, you just answered my question. Yeah. Like, I was like, where'd you learn how to like, that. Yeah. That's where you like, and she was like, I guess I never really like, I guess, totally. and I go, you so easily breezed over that. But a guy like me that was born here, I never signed my parents' checks. Yeah. I never filled out a phone call for them. Yep. Like I was thinking my daughter wouldn't know what to do. Like, and you're telling me you're 8 years old signing their checks?
I mean, think about what I challenged you with earlier. 12-year-olds are resilient. I mean, 8-year-olds. I think both those cases are, it's. I'm just going to bring it back to coaching because people tuned in and they're like, when are they going to talk about basketball? But it's really about, coaching is about pushing the people that you are in charge of leading to their limits. Yeah. And letting them bend, but don't break them. Yeah. And where's the wisdom in that? Yeah. How do you find wisdom to, okay, that's enough. And so that's something that you're always wrestling with. But the testimony of this 8-year-old, the 8-year-old, what's her name?
Her name's Ellen.
Ellen? Yeah. The 8-year-old Ellen, to your 12-year-old daughter, to my own son, to, what I went through as a 33-year-old. And so and what we all collectively have gone through coming out of COVID. Yeah. We're more resilient than we realize. Yeah. You just can't do it alone. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing I learned is that even as I'm sharing that story, I know that, I just recently I went to USA Basketball in Colorado Springs. I had this amazing privilege of representing our country in a way, right? Like that's the highest form of like basketball honor you can have. And I've been fortunate to be able to do that for 10 years. And I'm leaving Colorado Springs, where the U.S. Olympic Center is. I'm flying out of Denver, and I managed to have lunch with the dad who was responsible for me taking this coaching job at the American International School of Mozambique. So this is back in 2008. I'm teaching at the school that I said I wasn't going to because I wanted to be with the people, my people, the Mozambicans. And my wife's looking at me sideways like, you don't have any job offers. You have a master's degree in teaching. Go teach. Bring home, go get a job.
Provide.
Yeah. So I was doing that. And this gentleman, his name is Todd Chapman. He was what they call chargé d'affaires. So that's a French word. But it's basically he was acting ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Mozambique. And he had a young son who is now 30 years old. Todd is 60, and I'm 46. So we're kind of in that middle 15-year gap. Taught this kid, had this, again, I'm telling you, this amazing experience. Todd was actually the ambassador, so he pointed me towards a grant that would get me like $10,000 that I won to build this court. So he had a big part in helping me to build this court, helping me to get the flight, because I didn't have a sponsor, so he called Coca-Cola Mozambique and said, hey, I need you to sponsor this camp, right? And so that's how Mike Jones came over. And so as I'm telling the story, it could feel like, oh, he just did it himself. What? Good job, Marshall. How amazing. No, like I had this almost like a guardian angel. Like I don't know if Todd would like to be referred as that, but he was, right? He prayed for my wife and I, to get through one of the most difficult times ever. And so fast forward, I just saw him last weekend, and I'm telling him this story because he's amazed. He's like, I can't believe you get to coach these future, and he went to Duke, so he's a huge Duke fan. And he's like, you get to coach Jared McCain, and you got to work with Jason Tatum and Zion Williamson, and he's like fanboying, geeking out, and I'm like, Todd, like none of this is possible without you.
Wow.
Right? And it's crazy because he's 60 years old, and he had progressed in his career from our time together, fast forward a decade, to being the ambassador in Brazil. I mean, that's like the best job in the world in the State Department. And he left it behind because he wanted to see his grandchildren grow up. So he's driving me to the airport. He's like, Marshall, I left the best job in the world. But now I babysit my granddaughter. And what was amazing was the Jason Chapman, his son that I coached, I basically coached this team for this kid and some of his peers. He's 30 years old now, and he has his own business, like a video game company that's managing like a $250 million fund or something crazy like that. And he's 15 years younger than me. He's like, yeah, Coach Cho, there's my corner office right there, And I'm looking at this arc and going like, okay, I'm just a small part of their story.
Yeah.
But my story doesn't happen without somebody looking out for me at the exact moment that I needed.
Yeah.
And you talk about faith, and I think I'm pretty dedicated about my craft of coaching. I've been pretty lazy about practicing my faith or feeding it. But when you look at my own life testimony, like you can't deny, like how the heck am I one of the USA basketball coaches?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Like no one could have written that script when I started this coaching career. So
I imagine a lot of people think that.
Yeah, like who the heck is this guy?
Yeah.
How did you get there? What's your story? And again, if I had $1 for every time somebody came to me, and it's like, oh, hello, who are you? How'd you get into USA basketball? Dude, like you don't want to get to know me before you ask that question. Yeah. You're doing this backwards.
Right.
It's like what we're doing.
Right.
Like, it's like, oh, okay, now it makes sense.
Yeah.
He had some grit.
Right.
He had some courage. He had some like, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do anything kind of, And so some of those things that I learned in the South Bronx, that's not on my professional resume. The 6 years I lived in Harlem. Like, again, you could see, oh, he's been there. What was that like?
Yeah.
Being the only non-African American on a block.
Right.
In the beginning through the height of gentrification in Central Harlem.
Yeah.
Like I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw some of my students like by 2006, wondering like if they had a place to stay or they had to move up to the Bronx or outside north of the Bronx. So all those experiences kind of lead to today where I'm like, I am the caretaker of the Lake Oswego boys basketball program. And I don't know how long I will do this. But as long as I'm here, I'll try to take care of the chair as best as I can.
And like we were talking earlier, it seemed like, and maybe this is for all programs, the first few years were tough, and kind of trying to build the culture that you want to have. Probably a lot of doubters or naysayers. I was with the former regime before you were there. It kind of heard like, it doesn't really matter who's going to be here. Like not, no one's ever going to be totally happy. And really that's probably at any spot. But now it seems like, there's something built. There's a culture. You guys are, rolling. I mean, I know COVID was weird, but, it seems like you found the stride in the program. And maybe I'm wrong, but
You're wrong. No way. We haven't arrived. My brother is I don't know if you know, I have a younger brother. So I used to be the older brother who beats up on the younger brother. That was me as you're sharing your story.
Is he the chef?
Yeah. So my brother,
okay.
His name's Peter. He is the owner and chef of Hanok.
Okay.
And Toki.
I've seen you make some posts and like he's super well known in that space. I was actually telling Heather and William when I was up here setting this stuff up last week or whatever, and I was like, yo, I'll probably have Marshall. They're foodies, so and William's from Portland, and I was like, yo, have you, and they're like, I think I've heard of that, and I was like, that's Marshall's brother, and I don't think they've been there, and so they were like, we need to go there, but a little bit from stuff you've posted.
I don't know why I brought that up, but my brother is, super accomplished, but he always says, I know why I brought this up. Because everybody's like, you're living the dream. Every college coach I call, how you doing? Living the dream. No, you're not. Because they're like, I'm living the dream. They're not. Like, they don't have that pep in their step like I had when I was teaching in the South Bronx. They're miserable. It's a crappy job. It's really challenging. It's taxing on your family. And so my brother has this funny saying. He's like, living the dream. Like, I'm working the dream every day. Like, this is work. And you guys, and anybody who's in the restaurant industry would know how hard it is. And so,
especially now, especially through
post-COVID. The COVID time was like insane what they had to deal with. And I'm fussing about I can't get in the gym or my kids have to wear a mask in the gym, but they're throwing away food because they can't have service or things of that nature. But I think about that as you're saying, oh, Marshall, your culture must be built. No, like you have to fight for it every day. So the challenge now is kids have gotten used to in their 9 to 5, really their 8 to 3, that some teachers will let assignments slide, and it's okay. Like there's certain academic standards have been lowered to accommodate for the mental health needs and all of that, which I'm totally on board with. But at the same time, those things spill over into our culture where that's not how we do things. And I always want, this isn't to think of myself as more important than I am maybe, but I know that in many ways that the type of accountability or the type of the audience that I have, because I have a captive audience because they love basketball, they want to be there. This is a class that they're choosing to be in. And I would be cheating them, this captive audience, if I lowered my standard, right? So on one hand, it's constantly fighting it. A kid may just skip a optional workout and maybe they have appointments and other things going on, but that's something that in the coming up before COVID, like I really didn't deal with that much. As much of the stereotype and all those are soft suburban kids. No, like I've been blessed to have like amazing kids and amazing families, the kind of personal attacks on my character and integrity in my first few years before I got established. I think that's not just a Lake Oswego issue in this day and age. That's high school coaching in general, across the board. And some of my, resume pieces like USA Basketball or Nike Basketball. Those things help. Kind of, I have that buffer, if you could say, and that luxury more so than some of my counterparts, which I can really appreciate in certain times. But even talking about, like, you know, if we're being frank, like my predecessor, Coach Schaff, was here for 20 years, and Sonny Long, who just passed away for 30. We were talking about this before I got on. Over the last 6 decades, there's been 3 caretakers of the program. And now that Coach Long has passed away, like, the only 2 people who know what it is like to sit in this chair and be the head coach of Lake Oswego are myself and Mark Schaff.
Yeah.
And, you know, for people who may not know, he was, you know, he had a incident where it was captured on film where he, you know, knocked heads with one of the players, head bumped a kid, is basically was the storyline, right? And so he moved on, and I came into that place. And those first 2 years of the personal attacks and the judgments and the criticisms were, you understand what it must have been like for him for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. And I quickly realized that if I wasn't managing those attacks and resentments well, if I wasn't doing a good job of deflecting them or not taking them too hard and focusing on what I had to do, that I wasn't going to last long in this chair. That all the social media attention or the eyeballs on you, like, I wasn't going to be able to handle that well. So I think when I really reflect on it, you know, it was leaning on mentors, leaning on people I can call, leaning on my own staff that it was just that we did embrace by that 3rd year, like us against the world kind of mindset. And I had players who again, we have to credit our players. At the end of the day, they're the ones making the decisions, and coaching is no different than being a parent. Like, I just try to, you know, pour into them as much as I can, and whatever happens on the product, like, you did it, you know?
Yeah.
Players win games, coaches lose games. Like, that's a cliche, but that's really, if you don't understand that at the core of what you're doing in this profession, you're not going to last very long.
Yeah.
And so and that's why we come back to courage. You have to, I need to find players, 5 guys. I work with the end in mind. I need to have 5 guys on the floor in that last possession that any one of them will have the courage to take the shot, knowing that they can miss. You know, and I work, and if I can find those 5 guys, I'm good. Yeah. I'll live with the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like what we were talking earlier about having that chair at LO. I was with Schaff, I don't know, year and a half, when I started working in the sped department at Lake Oswego, and then started just helping coaching. And, you know, I thought that, and I was telling you this earlier, I thought I was going to come in and meet Mark, and because I had known of Mark, and back in 2000 was my senior year in high school, my last high school game, state tournament, we lost to Lake Oswego, so I knew who he was, and I played against Salim that last game, and Brett Elliott, who then went to Linfield.
That's Salim Stoudemire for the listeners.
Salim Stoudemire.
One of the best players to come out of our state.
He was pretty dang good. And Brett Elliott, who went to Utah to play football, and then Linfield. So my senior year at Linfield, he won a national championship football. So I knew of Schaff. Obviously, everyone knows Kevin Love, you know, he coached Kev. But I thought I was going to hear something different from him from all the time here and what my perception of Lake Oswego basketball was. And at that time, I was kind of thinking maybe I'll get into the whole teacher coach thing. And he actually was like, you don't want to do this. This has been very difficult. Every place is under a microscope. This one's really big. And he really was like, if you really want to coach, go back to McMinnville. Go back to maybe some smaller community. Like, it's been difficult here. And that was very interesting to me because he's won state championships. He's had the best player in the country. He's seen it all, like as a high school coach. Like, yeah, you've kind of went to everywhere you could go as a high school coach. And what I thought a lot of the success or the whatever was actually some of the hardest times for him.
Yep.
And so I had a very interesting perspective and seat. That was when, and I enjoyed my time. I enjoyed the dudes there. I'm gonna have Jazz Johnson, on here at some point when he's back in the States. Yep. There were some guys you had when you came in. Drew, really liked Drew. Drew Todd, and some of the other dudes. But really like got a perspective of this isn't what I thought it was. Yeah. And back when everything went down, and I was right there. Yeah. I'm in the video, and for lack of not really trying to get into all that, a transition happened, how I see it or not. And when that was all going down, I was actually asked, like, do you want to take over and be the coach? Yeah. And I was like, no. I don't.
That was a quick no.
I do not want to do that.
No, let's let Marshall do that instead.
It's like I really was like, and I had some of the players ask me like, "Yo, you be the coach," and I look back and like, I didn't have everything it would take to even put my name in the hat or try to attempt that. Yeah. Now looking back, I really know I didn't. Yeah. And seeing like what you bring to the table and whatnot, I just, no, that wasn't for me. But I tip my hat to you, and anyone that will lead this program and other programs. Like I've seen behind the curtain and it's not easy, and I just know it's not easy. And a big reason I'm doing this podcast is to try to like give a look behind the curtains to other people.
So people say, why is Marshall doing this?
And just to be fair, like I know there's some great stuff. Like I know when you got LO on your chest, like it means something and people know about the program. And I know that, but there's also like really tough stuff that comes with that as well. And trying to give an equal look to like, what is this? Yeah. And I never really thought about before you were talking with Sonny Passon, like you and Mark are the only two guys that know what that's really like. Yeah. And so, I've looked forward to reconnect and hear your story, see how it's going. But I really enjoy these conversations because, it's in this fast-paced world, how often do people really sit down and like, yo, like tell me your story. Yeah. Like I want to learn about you. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I've done that a lot because I like to talk. So there's a lot of podcast interviews I get called into, but this one is definitely unique. And I think, it drew me in just because of our, little interaction. And all the kids spoke highly of you. And, if it would have worked out for me to bring you on, it would have worked out, but this is where our lives, kind of intertwine. But
which is another thing I want to point out, like to people watching or listening, like don't burn bridges.
No, yeah,
don't burn bridges.
I do that.
Don't burn bridges. You never know. 8 years later. Yeah. I reach out to you and like, yo, will you do this? Yeah. And
this could have been an interrogation, not so what?
So why did you bring me back? I felt like everything you said about me was really positive things.
What's up?
But no, I look at this and I'm like, yo, I'm hoping you will help me grow this up in this area and be like, yo, talk to this person. Yo, hey, talk to Trav, good dude. This is a cool thing, and I think back, like, had I, back then when you're like, yo, I think I just want to bring in my own guys, which like, I get that too. Like I've been around hoops long enough to know like, and I've started companies where I'm like, I kind of want to do it my way. Like that might be helpful, but I kind of want to do it my way. So I get that. But I just wanted to like speak to that, like, don't burn bridges. You never know like how it's going to come back. And now we're sitting here, chatting. And things worked out, and I think we're both where we're meant to be. And so, I just kind of, we have a unique story just in how you got on and I was there and whatnot. And at the time I wanted to come back and help coach. Now I'm, well, I did say like, I'm going to help Mike McShane, McNary girls hoops, but still like, I definitely want to be at a distance. I want to be the good guy. I'm just there to just encourage. And yes, hey, you want to learn how to shoot a little bit better, do a little drop step, I'll help you. But really, I just want to like be a cheerleader and encourage, because what you guys got to deal with, it's there's a lot.
You're opting in. I think that's why I keep saying caretaker. Like, this isn't, if people think, and there might be there's certain coaches out there who love the status of it, but like Lake Oswego, being the head coach here was never about the status or any of that. And I think I was sharing again before off the camera, like we closed on the house in Lake Oswego a week before the application deadline passed. And like everybody else is like, they're almost anointing me to go get that job or whatever, right? I was a free agent for a year in between. I spent 2 years at University of Portland after DeMatha, and I really thought I was going to be a Division I head coach one day. So that was the path I was on. And during my first year, my mom got sick with stage 4 breast cancer. So this is also like a part of the story that
that's when we met, because you showed up to one of the practices and I was like, yo, who's this dude? This guy? And you were like, yo, whose motion offense was that? And that was the only thing that I told Shaf. I was like, yo, I kind of have a dope motion offense. And so
that's right.
they were like, you were like, hey, whose is that? And they were like, that guy.
That's
and
how
then
we started talking.
me and Troy Selvey, who coached down in Sacramento for Ponderosa. You guys have ran into each other a couple times. He's one of my dudes. We stole it from a team in Arizona that smacked us. We could not stop it. And afterwards, he went over to the coach. He's like, yo, tell me about that, because we couldn't stop it. But anyways, that's when we first met. And I was like, so what are you doing? And then you were like, well, I'm
just taking a year off.
And you were like, I'm helping transport to appointments. You were bouncing around to different practices, just checking it out. That's right. Like,
and nobody knew who I was. I had applied for the grant job right out.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't get past the first round.
Okay.
And I was coaching a 6th grade team at the Multnomah Athletic Club, which again, like for people, like if you're a coach, you just got to coach. Like it doesn't matter what grade level, what ability level. So I really enjoyed that experience. But I was just trying to figure out like, okay, do I want to go back to college? Because I can't, because I really made it about my family. And my brother, he's given a TEDx talk here before, and he shares how when we found out in December, he quit his job in January. So he really took a bulk of that, appointment stuff. And my sister, who is 7 years younger than me, she quit her job teaching in Brooklyn to come back. So all 3 of us as siblings, like we really rallied around her. And to this day, she's been receiving incredible care from Providence Hospital Cancer Research Center there. And so she's stage 4. So that means she gets her treatment every 3 weeks, no matter what. It's the cancer cells are in her bones. That's what I'll get my mom at some point, and so, that kind of putting a timeline on somebody you love, I guess to put a capper to this conversation, on one hand, I lost a baby before they came into this world, and that's a certain type of trauma and hardship that I had to overcome. And fast forward 10 years later, as I'm on this fast track to becoming a Division I head coach somewhere, my other very important, female figure in my life who sacrificed so much for my siblings and my dad for us to have all these opportunities, she needs us. And so to this day, like, that's what her being here and receiving great healthcare is what anchors for myself, my siblings, and by default, the people that we married, each of us married, and we're now all the cousins are growing up together, and this has kind of become our home, Portland, Oregon. But it goes to show you that, okay, so maybe I have no doubt that if I'd chosen to go coach in the NBA or college or wherever, I could do that. But here I am. And it's I could be a head coach at McMinnville or Springfield High or Lake Oswego. You know, it's I don't look at this job today as like a status thing or like, you know, obviously like I'm out on social media expanding our brand, but at the end of it, it's just you're a caretaker of a group of kids and by extension those families.
Yeah.
And so if I'm ministering to them to the best of my ability and having an impactful, you know, window of time, a critical time in their growth, then that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
You know, that's as important. I say this all the time when I come back from USA basketball. I just coached Jared McCain, the TikTok star that you guys all want me to take, you know, selfies and send to you and say hi to. Like, you're just as important as Jared.
Yeah.
You're just as important as, you know, Peyton Pritchard or Jason Tatum or any of these guys.
Right.
You're the guy in front of me now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be present with you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, it's great perspective to for you to have those kind of experiences, but for you to see it that way and be able to like pass along that message that no, you're just as you know. Like,
I mean, I take my work seriously. I don't take myself that seriously.
Yeah.
You know.
One of the because you've been talking about players, but I've been seeing. So another dude I hit up right before Hoopla in Salem was Slider. And I was like, yo, I'm starting this before I even did one. I was like, yo, because his videos are so tight. Yeah. I was like, yo, I want you to come on the podcast. Yeah. And hopefully now that I have this up, because he lives up in this area, right? He's a Portland guy. Yeah. Hopefully he'll come on. But like through his videos, do you have someone that was started with you at LO and now he's at one of the PIL schools?
Yeah, Dondrell Campbell.
Yes. Did he start with you at LO?
Yeah, I'm super proud of like our little coaching tree.
Okay.
So Dondrell was with me the first 2 years. He got the head coaching job at Cleveland. Ends up becoming PIL Coach of the Year 2 times. You know, takes Cleveland to Child Center for like the first time in 100 years.
Yeah.
Incredible job he's done. And now he's the head coach at Grant, which is ironic. Oh,
he
that's
is.
the job that I applied for, you know, however many years ago. Coach Key, because Coach Key is now at West Lynn. So Dondrell's the new head coach there. Jason Luno, I don't know if that name rings a bell. He played for Coach Schaaf, graduated in 2012. He was my right-hand man for 5-6 years.
Yes.
Now he's the assistant video coordinator with the Trailblazers. Corey Coombe, who also played, you know, and graduated in 2013. He's an assistant coach at Redlands. So, yeah, like our tree's growing, man. And it's like, it's really powerful to see that, you know, we become a program where we're not just serving student athletes, but really if you're a motivated young coach and you want to grow, you know, you can come and spend 2-3 years apprentice under me and see if you can spread your wings elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I've been noticing. Jason, you posted something yesterday, maybe he was getting on an airplane. Yeah. And then I was like, yo, he must not be helping Marshall anymore. No. He must be doing something with the Blazers. You tagged him and Holly Brooke that does the I don't know. She's just on TV all the time for the Blazers. Yeah. But yeah, I was like, man, his little coaching tree is already. Yeah, we're going. And I didn't know he went to Grant. Like he just got to Grant.
Dondrell, yeah, this is first year.
Okay. Yeah. I just remember seeing some of Slide's videos and with Cleveland, and like I'm a hoop guy in Oregon. I'm like, Cleveland's good. Yeah. Like, what am I missing? Yeah. Like,
incredible job. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been cool too to kind of see where the dudes under you have been going.
Yeah. Yeah. That could have been you, Travis. You could have been the head guy.
You know, I sit here saying I'm just fine with fine. That. I think I found my thing. I really enjoy this. Yeah. You know, I want everyone you just listed to come sit in that chair.
There you go.
I think the storytelling is so powerful and impactful, and it's amazing how intertwined people's stories are. You know, and you never know. Like the guy you were talking about that was like, man, you're coaching all these people, and you're like, yo, you put me on though. Yeah. Like, don't you realize like
he couldn't connect the dots there.
Like you put me on though. Yeah. And you never know like what, you know, you might be doing for someone. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure like one day some of your peeps are gonna come back and you'll be like, yo, I can't believe you're doing that. And you're like, you put me on, Marshall.
That's right.
So I just think it's neat to hear all those different intertwined and and talk about it and I don't know. There's enough negativity going on out in the world, and we know that. We know that stuff still is tough and messy, but trying to have a conversation of encouragement, advice, like people probably watch or listen to this, be like, "Yo, I didn't know that about Marshall." I really like each of these episodes. I would love if someone was like, "Yeah, I haven't really shared this," and felt comfortable to do that because it just makes you more human, more relatable, and so I appreciate you doing this. This is the
Yeah.
first one here in the Bat Cave.
No, thank you.
Yeah, this I'm excited to grow this up in this area. Right now I'm like just down in Salem, but I figured people come here, this is kind of just a cool
Yeah.
spot anyways.
Yep.
So, yeah, man, I appreciate you coming by.
No, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, bro.
Yep.